Well, where did all of this come from? Where did I start writing for children? When I was about 9 years old, I used to tell my sisters stories. I had 3 younger sisters, and we'd all curl up in one bed, and in the darkness I would tell them great adventures about girls like us who had the most amazing times and who were always winners. That was very important. I think we recognized that we were less than powerful in our own homes, that life was sometimes difficult for our parents and for us, but we remade ourselves in these stories. Stories of girls who defeated evil at every corner. We escaped from villains. We crossed stormy seas. We swam crocodile-infested rivers. All of these stories, of course, grew as we grew, and then they became a little older as we got into our teen years. And I'm not going to tell you about those. However, when my own children came along years later, I had abundance of stories to tell them too, which was all right for 3 of the children. The 4th didn't relate to fantasy, and when we went to the library to get books, he would look for books on electricity, trains, volcanoes, anything that was factual and mechanical. When he was 6 years old, this boy, Edward, was not reading. And we lived in a house full of story, but when I was reading the children books like Charlotte's Web, he would sit on the floor playing with his cars and say, "That's not true, animals don't talk." I realized that he was a different kind of learner. I talked to his teacher about his inclinations and his disinclinations and how he did not like to read. She pulled out the books that he was supposed to be reading, and these were very dull, prosaic books. And she said, "There is no reason why a child should want to read these books." And she was right, because in those days television was quite new to New Zealand, but children had access to lots of entertainment through television. Why should they bother to read books that were dull and difficult, to do word exercises that had no meaning? I started with Edward by writing stories about him, factual stories about life on the farm, things he did. He didn't mind if I exaggerated a bit. Or I could write a story about Edward saving his father from a fire when the hay barn was burning down, about Edward driving the tractor, about Edward teaching his father to scuba dive. All of those stories were quite welcome because they were based on actual things that he understood, things that he thought were true. And he did learn to read, and so did other children in his class. But the stories were all about themselves, and we used to start with story talk. I would say to them, "What did you do in the last holidays or last weekend? If you had the best birthday party that you could think of, what would it be like? Or, what did you dream last night? If you had 3 wishes, what would they be?" And they would tell me their story, and I would type it on my old rattly typewriter with a carbon copy. I would give them the top copy to take home so that their parents could read it to them, and then I would make a little book out of the carbon copy, just staple together a little book, simplify the text with a word list the teacher had given me, and do little drawings, so that the child had his or her own book with their name all the way through. Because the first person story would get translated to third person and the child's name would be included in the book. This was his or her own story, and of course they could relate to it, and they forgot that they were not good readers. those children that I worked with in the 1960s taught me some very valuable lessons about children's books. They taught me that children who are indifferent to reading very often develop a tense attitude to reading. They're children who might be rather sensitive, or children who have met quite a bit of failure in their lives, and they are not going to put themselves at risk anymore. So they develop this tense attitude, their body language is very stiff, they don't want to read. I learnt the value of humour. Children cannot be tense when they're laughing, and it seemed to me that humour was the key to success. They also taught me that it's a good idea to put a good strong ending at the end of a little book or the end of a little story, and very often there was a twist in the ending, and that twist in the ending was very satisfying for those children. I could see it as like giving them dessert after eating vegetables. It was a reward at the end of the book for getting to that end and for persevering. But above all, the story needed to relate to the child's life and not to some adult's expectation of that child. Children needed to be regarded as having their own authority, of being real people at a certain age, and to be respected as such, not as some kind of adult investment.